very much, Paul, and yeah, great to be with you all this morning. As I think you all know, we were really hoping that Bishop Jerry Almanza from the Philippines was going to be with us. Bishop Jerry is the Bishop of San Carlos in the Philippines and is the lead bishop for Laudato Si in the Philippines. And he was due to come over the last few days. He was due to arrive on Monday, and he was due to be here on Thursday for the Standard Chartered AGM, where he was hoping to ask a question at the Standard Chartered AGM. He was travelling with a delegation, someone from an organisation called SEED Philippines. I think that's the Centre for Energy, Ecology and Environment. Centre for Energy, Ecology and Development. I may have got that wrong. And also an organisation called Bokani in Germany, which does a lot of work around fossil fuel finance. So, as I say, sadly, Bishop Jerry's visa didn't arrive in time, so he's unable to be with us in person today. But he's recorded a video message about the work he's been doing to raise awareness and raise concerns about HSBC and Standard Chartered's financing of fossil gas projects in the Philippines, particularly in the Verde Island Passage, which is a really marine biodiverse area in the Philippines. So we're going to get from that.
Good day, everyone. While I'm saddened not to be with you in person today, I deeply appreciate this opportunity to share our advocacies in the Philippines. Across the Philippines, people are rising to defend our home against the threat of yet another fossil fuel. I mean fossil gas and liquefied natural gas. These endanger not only our ecosystems, but also the lives of many communities. At the heart of the Coral Triangle lies the Verde Island Passage, or VIP, a marine sanctuary globally recognized as the center of marine biodiversity, our very own Amazon of the oceans. The Protect VIP network, of which Caritas Philippines is a member, tirelessly works to raise awareness about the urgent need to protect this incredibly rich marine life. Last year brought significant recognition. The California Academy of Sciences designated the Verde Island Passage as a hope spot. This designation acknowledges both its extraordinary biodiversity and its cultural and economic significance, igniting further support for its protection as a marine protected area. This momentum is amplified by the ongoing campaign advocating for the VIP to be recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Verde Island Passage sustains the livelihood of approximately 2 million people across 5 provinces in the Philippines. Yet, this ecosystem faces a great threat from the massive expansion of fossil gas projects. Alarmingly, the VIP has become the epicenter of this expansion in the Philippines, currently hosting 5 fossil gas plants, 2 operating LNG import terminals, and 10 more proposed LNG and gas plants. Leading this destructive gas expansion in the VIP is the Philippines' largest energy player, the San Miguel Corporation. Just recently, San Miguel divested its stake in the gas facility within the VIP to 2 other major energy players in the country, that is, Meralco and Aboitiz. Long before these gas facilities began operations in the VIP, Caritas, in collaboration with the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development, conducted water quality and marine ecology analysis. These studies revealed alarming levels of key pollutants and heavy metals linked to industrial activities surrounding the gas facility sites. It documented a significant decline in fish biodiversity and abundance in waters adjacent to these project sites compared to the rest of the BIP, clearly indicating the impact of these stressors. The devastating consequences of fossil fuels in the Verde Island passage became even more apparent in 2023 when San Miguel's chartered tankers spilled millions of liters of oil, causing suffering to coastal communities that continues to this day. Given these consequences and the clear impacts of fossil fuels on the Verde Island passage, we tirelessly fight to protect our home, especially that the Philippines is among the most disaster-prone countries in the world. The Philippines possesses immense renewable energy potential at around 1,200 gigawatts. A study from Seed and Climate Analytics has confirmed this potential, stating that the Philippines' renewable energy capacity is over 40 times greater than the current total installed capacity across all technologies. To align with the 1.5 degree centigrade goal, fossil fuels must be phased out by 2040. Adding to the concerns, San Miguel's subsidiary, South Premier Power Corporation, is charging electricity consumers more than double for generation tariffs after switching from indigenous gas to imported LNG. The Department of Energy and Electricity consumers are also raising serious concerns about potential violations of anti-competitive laws. Communities and civil society are not standing idly by. We are actively pushing back against this destructive gas expansion. In 2023, Fisher Folk leaders, together with Protect BIP, we filed a complaint with Japan Bank for International Cooperation, or GBIC, concerning the actions of the AG&P, which violate Philippine laws and the investment rules of GBIC. Since then, AG&P has divested from the LNG project. Furthermore, San Miguel Corporation has divested the majority of its shares in its proposed gas power plant within the BIP, a testament to the growing pressure. And speaking of our wins, Fisher Folk groups won a landmark ruling before the Court of Appeals to protect the waters of the BIP from pollution and pressured another company to shelve its LNG terminal project. The Church, guided by Pope Francis Laudato Si and Laudate Deum, is also actively walking the talk. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, or CPCP, has pledged to divest from banks supporting fossil fuels by this year, 2025, the Jubilee Year of Hope, as stated in our 2022 pastoral letter. This commitment ensures that the Church's financial actions align with its profound religious teachings on environmental protection and the promotion of human rights and dignity. The CBCP has issued a powerful call for unity and action in the face of the climate emergency and planetary crisis. We urge everyone to use their position, either as shareholders, clients, or stakeholders of financial institutions, both within and beyond the Philippines, especially domestic banks, to demand clear policies and plans to phase out their exposure to coal, fossil gas, and destructive energy in line with the 1.5 degrees centigrade ambition. We also have made a firm commitment. Without clear commitments and policies from these banks to divest from fossil fuels, we will withdraw all resources from them no later than 2025 and hold them accountable to their fiduciary duties and moral obligations as climate actors. The Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences also strongly advocates for more ambitious climate commitments, such as the Paris Agreement, and works to bridge the gap between the national climate targets and the scientifically necessary 1.5 degrees centigrade global goal. It also emphasized that preserving Asia's rainforests, coral reefs, and rivers must be a top priority, urging governments, businesses, and communities to collaborate with indigenous peoples, leading the way to ensure these vital ecosystems thrive. Our work as shareholders and stakeholder engagements is indeed putting pressure on domestic banks to divest from dirty fossil fuels. Over the past years, along with the withdrawal from coal network, 9 out of 15 domestic banks have already committed to divesting from coal, and domestic coal financing has decreased by an impressive 91% compared to 2016. However, the expansion of gas and LNG infrastructure in the Philippines continues to receive concerning support through the money pipelines of European financial institutions, specifically UK banks such as SHBC and Standard Chartered. For that reason, over the past 2 years, Protect BIP, with the Church of Fisherfolk leaders, has undertaken journeys to Europe, United States, and Japan to directly engage these financial institutions. Our message is clear: divest from and deny any further debt and investment to the companies that are destroying the Verde Island passage. Some financial institutions have listened to our urgent demands. DWS and RST have committed to divesting from San Miguel, while BNP Paribas has stated that financing gas in the BIP is not part of their strategy. There is no reason for other banks not to follow suit. Together with the church and local communities, we will relentlessly fight until our home, the Verde Island Passage, is protected. We hope we can count on you to join and support us. Thank you.
So thank you very much to Bishop Jerry for recording this video message. I think you'll agree that's very powerful. We would love to hear it in person, but I think he's outlined pretty clearly the impacts that this financing from UK banks, HSBC and Standard Chartered is having on communities in the Philippines. Perhaps at some point during lunchtime or later on in the day, I'm sure there will be a group photo. There are a couple of really nice posters here, so perhaps some of us could stand with those and perhaps send a photo to Bishop Jerry and others later on. So as Paul said, I'm the James Buchanan, I'm the Climate Finance Campaign Manager at Laudato Si Movement. In terms of Laudato Si Movement's work, we I guess focus on 3 main areas, and you've already heard a little bit from Mary and Peter. It was wonderful to hear about your experience as Siamese and also the wonderful work you're doing with the Simply in your parish. In terms of Lava's its works, there's three areas, one of which is eco-spirituality and ecological conversion. So we're very involved as a founder of the Season of Creation, working with various ecumenical partners around the world. Sustainability, so particularly if you've heard of the Lava's Action Platform, this is something that dioceses, religious orders, parishes, schools and so on have developed Laudato Si action platform plans. Some elements of it are quite similar to Live Simply in terms of the parishes, so I think certainly for parishes in the UK, I think the Live Simply scheme is a wonderful scheme, and that's one that we would encourage people to engage with. And then the third area, which is I guess the area that I'm particularly working on, is advocacy for climate and ecological justice. And so my work primarily focuses on fossil fuel divestment among Catholic institutions around the world, banks financing of fossil fuels as well and campaigning around that, and also doing some European advocacy as well. So I think we're probably best known in terms of our advocacy work for our work on fossil fuel divestment. There are now over 370 Catholic institutions around the world that have made divestment commitments, and that's over 20% of the total of institutions around the world that have made divestment commitments are Catholic institutions. But we work very closely also with ecumenical multi-faith partners, so with Operation Noah, with Green Faith, World Council of Churches, and Green Anglicans as well. We've worked for a number of years together on this issue. Next slide. So in the years after Laudato Si was published, Pope Francis was really outspoken on the need for accelerated action on the climate crisis. And he was well aware of the particular responsibility of major oil and gas companies as major contributors to the climate crisis. And this is a quote from Pope Francis when he met oil and gas company chief executives in the Vatican back in 2018. He said, even more worrying is the continued search for new fossil fuel reserves, whereas the Paris Agreement clearly urged keeping most fossil fuels underground. Civilization requires energy, but energy use must not destroy civilization. And back in 2020, 5 years after Laudato Si was published, the Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development published a resource called Journeying Towards Care for a Common Home 5 years after Laudato Si. And this recommended divestment from fossil fuel companies. It said, promote ethical, responsible and integral criteria for investment decision making, taking care not to support companies that harm human or social ecology or environmental ecology, for example, through the use of fossil fuels. So next slide. So yeah, how are fossil fuel companies doing? Well, you may remember that oil and gas companies, including BP and Shell, made commitments on climate and reducing oil and gas production in the year or two before COP26 in Glasgow. But unfortunately, after oil and gas prices surged, after Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, they doubled down on oil and gas production. The former CEO of BP, Bernard Looney, described his company as a cash machine, while many people were facing a cost of living crisis as a result of high gas prices. And Shell scrapped its 2035 climate target last year in order to continue growing its gas business. And BP last October abandoned its goal to cut oil output. So going back a few years, a number of churches in the UK, around the world, and also Catholic institutions had pursued a strategy of shareholder engagement with fossil fuel companies, believing that dialogue was the way to bring about change with these companies. And while it's true that one or two shareholder resolutions did get passed at one or two of the oil and gas companies, they were often not very demanding, let's say, in terms of some of the things that they were asking for from the oil and gas companies. And unfortunately, as I've just mentioned, in the last year or two, the oil and gas industry has actually rowed back on a number of the pledges that they made in the past. So at this point, we believe that divestment is the most effective strategy and the one that all Catholic institutions should be pursuing. So next slide. Together with our friends and partners at Operation Noah, World Council of Churches, Green Anglicans and Green Faith, we worked on a number of global divestment announcements. This was the largest one, just before COP26. The most recent one, last November, we saw the first Catholic institutions in France to divest. And in this particular announcement before COP26, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Scotland, all of the Catholic dioceses in Scotland, and several Catholic dioceses in England and Wales also announced divestment. So next slide. So in terms of how the Catholic diocese in England and Wales are doing, we give thanks and credit to Operation and Bokani for this graphic. We're now at a point where just over 2/3 of Catholic dioceses in England and Wales are no longer investing in fossil fuel companies. 13 of them have made full divestment commitments. And there are still 6 Catholic dioceses in England and Wales that are investing in fossil fuel companies. So we're really hoping in this 10th anniversary year of our ROC, and obviously halfway through this critical decade when we need to halve those carbon emissions, we're hoping that more Catholic dioceses will make divestment commitments. So you can have a look there, and if your diocese is on that list, we're very happy to speak with you later about how we can encourage your diocese to move forward on this issue.
Could you read out the first 4 of the green? Because the right is not.
Okay, so yeah, so the first 4 of the greens, we've got Arundel and Brighton, Birmingham, Brentwood, East Anglia, Hallam next to Newcastle. Yeah, you see the rest, but yeah, I think these slides will be circulated later. And then in terms of the ones that are still investing in fossil fuel companies, just to read those out. So we've got Cardiff and Meneville, which is sort of merged, if you like, as a diocese. Liverpool, Nottingham, Plymouth, Shrewsbury, and Wrexham. So yeah, shows you the ones that are currently still investing in fossil fuels. So next slide. Okay, so on to banks. So as I say, we're also working on banks financing of fossil fuels, and since the Paris Agreement, the 5 big high street banks in the UK have financed fossil fuel production and expansion to the sum of hundreds of billions of pounds. So we're talking about eye-watering sums. And the Banking on Climate Chaos report last year highlighted that the world's 60 biggest banks have committed $6.9 trillion over 8 years since the Paris Agreement to the fossil fuel industry, which is really driving the climate crisis. You can see here the top 5 banks in the UK, Barclays and HSBC being the biggest fossil fuel funders. We've also got Santander there, obviously based in Spain, but very much on the UK high street. And also NatWest and Lloyds. And a couple of people have mentioned to me recently about RBS as a bank that some organisations and individuals use as well. That's owned by NatWest, so if you sort of if you see RBS, they would fall under NatWest.
The Spanish one?
The Spanish bank is Santander.
Exactly.
Yeah. Next slide. So we heard from Bishop Jerry from the Philippines about HSBC's financing of liquefied natural gas, LNG, and fossil gas power plants in the Verde Island Passage. And in the last few days, we joined together in solidarity with campaigns from the Philippines and from around the world, calling for HSBC. This is outside the HSBC AGM. We joined with Operation NOAA there as well, Christian Climate Action, various other groups, calling on HSBC to stop its support for fossil gas in the Philippines, particularly in the Verde Island Passage. Next slide. And we're also outside the Standard Chartered AGM on Thursday. Perhaps not quite as well known a bank, it's not one of those high street banks, but it is, again, a major financier and lender to the fossil fuel industry, including the Verde Island Passage, and also liquefied natural gas in Mozambique. There's a project there which has also been supported by Standard Chartered. Next slide. Just wanted to briefly mention some of the other banks as well. So Barclays, this is from the Bureau of Investigative Journalism last year. Barclays was described as totally dishonest by Andrew Harper from Epworth, which is a subsidiary of the Central Finance Board of the Methodist Church, for calling tens of billions of dollars of lending to fossil fuel companies sustainable finance. So this isn't sustainable finance, it's financing climate crisis. Next slide. Santander is the largest European financier of oil and gas in the Amazon, and the 4th largest financier of oil and gas in the Amazon globally. So I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about that in the next few months in the lead up to COP30 in Brazil. Next slide. The Independent last month reported that NatWest had amended its fossil fuel policy to allow the bank to support financing for oil and gas companies without a credible climate transition plan. NatWest has lent funds to BP, which weakened its own net zero policies also last month. Next slide. And Lloyds, although there are sort of hopes that Lloyds might become one of the big flags that might sort of stop financing fossil fuels, but at the moment they are still funding fossil fuels. And last December, the UK's advertising regulator found an advert by Lloyds Bank about its low carbon policies for being misleading. Next slide. So last November, at LRC movement, we supported helped to coordinate with Just Money and other Just Money movement and other organisations a statement of concern from 70 Christian organisations, including 8 Catholic religious orders, the National Justice and Peace Network, Operation Noah, SCIAP, and many others, a statement to the CEOs of the UK's largest banks, calling on them to stop fossil fuel financing. And this is a quote from Sister Susan Francois, who's the assistant congregation leader of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. She said, "We believe that we have a fiduciary responsibility to the earth and present and future generations. We signed this statement because we agree with Pope Francis that we must transform the economy from one that kills into an economy of life." So really hard-hitting, but I think that really communicates very clearly the reason why the banks need to move away from financing fossil fuels. Next slide. So in the last couple of months, LRC movement has joined as a partner of the Big Bank Switch campaign, which encourages Christians in the UK to switch from fossil fuel financing banks to ethical banks. And this is something that you can do not only if you currently have a bank with perhaps HSBC or Barclays or whatever. And I'll be completely honest, I once had an account with HSBC when I was at university because they gave a free rail card. I think that's probably something that many people will have done. So this campaign is encouraging Christians to switch from these big fossil fuel financing banks to more ethical banks. And Which magazine has mentioned Nationwide, Triodos, and Co-op Bank as 3 more ethical banks that don't finance fossil fuels that people could consider. Obviously, we don't give financial advice, so we very much encourage people to search that out. But yeah, that's. And also to say that this is a campaign that people can also join even if you've changed your bank in the past. So it's something that can also be done retrospectively. And that really helps to build the movement and show the wide support for this campaign and the calls for these major banks to move away from financing fossil fuels. So next slide. I won't read it out now, but there's a really nice case study on our website from Helen Elwes, who's on the right-hand side here, of her personal bank switching journey. So I can share the link perhaps later on as well. Next slide. On the LRC website we've got there's an organisation called bank.green where you can see how is my bank doing, and you can kind of plug it in and find out whether your bank is financing fossil fuels or if it's one of the better ones. So that's again a really good resource. The next slide, final one. So far, over 200 people have joined the Big Bank Switch campaign, so we're hoping to increase the numbers in the next few weeks and months. So if you haven't already, please do consider joining the campaign, the Big Bank Switch campaign, and we're aiming to get, beyond 500 or 1,000 people joining that campaign. We're already over 200. And to really put pressure on the banks to end their financing. So thanks so much for listening. I'm going to pass on to the next.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. As has been said, I'm Bokani and I'm a campaign officer at Operational. I've been there for about 5 years now, and I'm really happy to be joining you today and seeing some familiar faces. So I'm going to give a very tiny introduction to Operational because I think we always assume everybody knows who we are, but we are a smaller charity, so I think sometimes it's helpful. So we were founded in 2004 to provide a Christian response to the climate crisis, and we're an ecumenical charity, so we support interfaith work and leadership on the climate crisis. We're faith motivated and science informed and inspired. So we really seek to promote leadership in the Christian community, and we're keen to support a rapid transition to clean energy, 100% clean and emissions-free energy. So we're working with Christian denominations all across the UK and now a lot more internationally as well for partnerships to come together in our response. And really today I want to give the sort of other side of the coin. So we've worked for a long time on divestment, as James mentioned, and it was a really big part of that. And now that a lot of the denominations in the UK have made those divestment commitments, it's how do we think about what the future looks like, how do we think about investing in clean energy and renewable energy. So I would have spent a little bit more time speaking about some of the impacts of the climate crisis, but we already heard a lot of that from Bishop Jerry, and one of the things that we're always keen to emphasize is that it's not just the impact of the fossil fuels, but even the process of getting them out of underground or under the sea and exporting them causes so much harm and damage to communities, as well as the impacts of actually burning those fossil fuels. And one of the reasons we want to talk about investing in climate solutions is we know there's a climate crisis existing, a cost of living crisis existing, and so sometimes when we talk to dioceses and religious orders and they say, well, we don't have any extra cash to be putting money into renewables, although we recognize it's important. I think what I want to start by emphasizing today is that churches, dioceses specifically, and religious orders already have money that they are already investing. So what we're trying to encourage is the emphasis of that investment. And part of why we look at investments is because that can be part of the systems level solutions. So we can start to shift things in terms of our finances so that it aligns with some of the really great work that we heard about earlier this morning in our parish community. So this can start to change things at a systems level and provide examples for others to follow. I also want to say, when you think about what climate solutions are, we heard from Bishop Jerry, we can't be thinking about liquefied natural gas as a climate solution. We already have many tried and tested and already working well climate solutions such as solar, wind energy, and we recognize that it has to be a mix of all of those and not just one or the other. And so one of the things that I'm always really keen to say is, yes, it is complex, and we want to make sure that we're not repeating some of the injustices that we have seen in previous patterns when thinking about energy solutions, and we want to make sure that there's just and equitable ways of accessing clean energy for everybody. And so when we think about some of those reasons that we want to invest in climate solutions, we recognize it as part of aligning our faith with our finances. So it's part of a way of loving our neighbors, and by investing in solutions that protect and sustain communities affected by climate change, we can show in a practical way our solidarity. It's also a really pragmatic way of caring for God's creation. And many churches have chosen to divest, as I mentioned, from harmful practices such as fossil fuel production, exploration, and expansion. And by investing in climate solutions, the church can move to actively promote care for climate creation. And one of the areas that we look at operational is also how we use church land. And we know different religious orders have access to like farmlands, and how can we use that as a way of caring for creation. We also know that as churches, we're really important leaders in the financial world, and we don't always think about this, but one of my favorite photos is a group of Dominican nuns who were working with their bank to say, we want a fossil-free fund, for example, and that led other people to follow them. So the church can be really prophetic in its action. By investing in climate solutions, the church can act in an equally prophetic way and use its voice to speak up and amplify, because what we do recognize is not only do we need to move away from fossil fuels, but we need to have something to move to, and that means a drastic increase in the availability of fossil-free sources of energy. Old school way of presenting. One of the things that we heard about earlier was just some of the unjust ways in which our global financial systems work. And it's part of how we might want to think about creating more just ways of using our resources. So there's a huge opportunity for climate solutions to tackle fundamental issues of poverty, inequality, and human rights violations if we choose to do so. So as people within dioceses, you can talk to your bishop, you can talk to your financial secretaries. If you don't know who they are, please come and say to us. I can point you to all that information that is publicly available. And say to them, this is something that is important to us. We want to make sure that money that we're putting into offertory and money that is being left to our diocese and has historically been left to our diocese is being used in a responsible way. And we want to create a sense of hope. In a time when actually, when we look at some of the impacts of the climate crisis, it can be very overwhelming. So therefore, if anyone, I really appreciate this part of scripture in my work, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. So often I think about how we use church resources as part of reparation, as part of reconciliation. So there's really a missionary aspect to how the church uses its resources. And specifically today I wanted to introduce a couple of resources that we produced at Operation Noah as a way of thinking about how we might support our diocese. So I'm really glad to have worked on a toolkit which is available at the back in a printed format, but also we have copies online, soft copies if you would like these. And I was kind of delighted when the new Pope chose Leo as his name, because I felt like, I may have quoted Pope Leo XIII in this, as he's known as the father of Catholic social teaching. And really actually working on this felt like a really wonderful way of rediscovering a Catholic tradition and heritage. And so we created this as a toolkit which tries to really bring together those strong traditions of Catholic social teaching to apply it to how we think about climate, and specifically how we think about climate resources. So it sounds quite niche, but we felt that there was a need to have a toolkit that was that could be used by finance committees, that could be used by religious orders as they decide how to use their resources. So that was really the context in which we saw the toolkit being used, as well as, for individuals just wanting to think about these issues for themselves. And so the toolkit looks at 7 key principles of Catholic social teaching and uses the See, Judge, Act framework to unpack each of those areas. Race through a little bit. And one thing that I was really aware of is, in my very tiny experience working in an investment bank, I recognized that a lot of the time we're looking at charts, we're looking at spreadsheets, we're looking at a lot of data and trying to assimilate that to make decisions. And one of the things that we weren't doing, and which we have a particular strength in doing as Christians, is to really observe our world as it is. So in the toolkit, some of the recommendations are to visit local communities that are affected by the climate crisis. In my local area, I work as an artist, so our local studios were flooded last year because of more extreme rains that we faced. And so it's not really difficult to find places within our local diocese where we can actually see, well, these impacts are not something of the future, but they're happening, and they're not just far away, they're happening locally. So we wanted to think about how can we invite people who might otherwise be looking at spreadsheets and charts, important as they are, to also think about other sources of information. So the C aspect is a way of looking for other ways of getting that information. In the judge section, I really love judge, I prefer to discern, but it's a way of working with financial managers and fund managers, so people who are professionals and qualified to give you financial advice, but a way of asking them some of those questions like, how are you including some of the impacts that might be happening to local communities? How are you looking at that? How are you assessing that for all the investments that you're making? What are the risks involved to the well-being of young people? Are there children working in some of the companies that you are investing in, and how are you assessing that? And then providing some ways in which capital organizations can then act. I know I'm slightly over time, so I won't go too far into it, but I will just give a very brief recommendation that we're asking the diocese to do, which is in a really practical way to look at what their investments have been and to think about what commitments they can make towards green investment specifically. So we're asking those that may not already be there to think about how much of a proportion of their existing investments they can put towards clean energy. Those that already have some investments, we're encouraging them to put more. We recognize that we need at least triple what is currently invested in renewables for that to offset and to provide for the energy uses that we will need in the coming few years. And so I also have a leaflet that please do take it to your finance officers, take it to your parish priest, ask them to take it to their diocese. And if you are part of a religious order, again, we ask that you have a look at what commitment you can set aside in this way. A minute over time. So I will stop there. I'm around all day, so please do come and have a chat. I know it can be quite niche, but we're here to